Management Committee, Tuesday, November 2nd, day to vote. Been joined by the Honorable Councilmember Paul Krikorian. And are we having Councilmember Huizar join us? Okay, he's on his way. And we have 4 items. And I understand our planning director is practicing his 360s on his BMX still. Okay, but he should be feeling better. And would you have Mr. Alan Bell with us? Thank you, sir, for joining us. We have cards and items number 1, 2, and 4. So we'll call those special. When you do come up to the microphone, give us your name and address. I know many of you have written eloquent letters, but if you can make sure you make your statement within the time allotted on the clock, so we can get to the main points of your message, we would appreciate that very much. When you find yourself in a position where the previous speaker has made all your points and expressed all your thoughts, it's okay to say I agree with the previous speaker and give us anything new or different. That way we can move on in the committee. So that being said, I would like to recommend, Councilman Krikorian, that we can approve item 3, seeing no cards on that one, and that would be one item we can move on if you concur. Yep. So that will be a second on that motion, and that will be action on item number 3. And item number 1, Roberto, you want to summarize item 1, please?
Yes, council members. Item 1 is a motion, Cardenas Han, it's instructing building and safety planning, CAO, and city attorney to prepare a report on the cost and fees to sustain an on-site sign code administration program and to create a special revenue fund.
Okay, can we have the staff report on this?
I don't think it's there's any staff report as of yet. It would be simply something that you can adopt, Councilman, or I don't know if Mr. Bell wants to discuss it.
Councilmember Reyes, Terry Kaufman, Macias City Attorney's Office. It's my understanding that last week our office received from council a set of priorities to work on related to sign districts and consensus-based items, and we're told to deal with on-site sign issues at a later time. So
right.
This seems like it might be a little inconsistent in the direction. Correct.
So we are treating those issues on parallel tracks, but at the moment they're separate. And you're right, on the previous instruction, we were focused on off-site. This is on-site. As on-site issues go, we wanted to get the feedback relative to costs and fees to sustain the sign code administration program. So that's the feedback we'll be getting once this action is taken. But this does give us affords us the opportunity to hear from the various stakeholders on this issue. So today we'll go through the public comments, since there is no direct report, because that's what we'll be anticipating. So that being said, we can move forward with the public hearing. So we have with us Veronica Perez. Lo and behold.
Good afternoon, Veronica Perez from Holland and Knight, representing the California Sign Association. Thank you, Councilman Reyes and members of Plum, for scheduling this very important issue so we can start the discussion on on-site signage. We would also like to thank Councilman Cardenas for his leadership in proposing the Sign Code Administration Program. Over the last year and a half, the On-Site Sign Coalition, which includes the California Sign Association, CCA, VICA, the Chamber, BOMA, the Hotel Association, and the New Car Dealers Association of Los Angeles, have been working closely with community members and city staff on a plan that we believe is a win-win-win. A win for communities because it will bring resources to cleaning up the visual landscape in the most impactful way. A win for the city because it will raise much-needed dollars and could put laid-off city inspectors back to work. And a win for businesses because it will streamline the permit process and allow businesses to keep the currently allowable on-site signage, which is the most cost-effective and efficient form of advertising to potential customers. We ask that you approve the motion before you, which will ask the departments to report back on the feasibility of enacting the Sign Code Administration Program. The proposed program has several elements: an Amnesty and Education program so that businesses can come into compliance penalty-free for a set period of time, a streamlined permit process to make it easier for businesses to comply with the law, and increased resources to enforce the current rules rather than enacting stricter sign regulations that would hurt businesses and our economy when we can afford that the least. We ask that the city hold off on processing previously introduced on-site sign restrictions until we can assess the landscape upon proper enforcement of the sign code. And I believe that would be our request, that to clarify from the last Plum hearing, that we leave the current on-site regulations alone to investigate how we can raise resources for enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dennis Hathaway. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, committee members. I'm Dennis Hathaway with the Coalition to Ban Billboard Blight. Our concern is primarily off-site signage, but a lot of our members and our supporters are members of community groups that are working to improve their neighborhoods, and this chaotic, cluttered signage is a definite concern with those groups. It's a hindrance to the efforts to make those neighborhoods more attractive both to residents and to the kind of businesses that people want to attract to their communities. So to the extent that this program would enhance that effort, I think this is, we would definitely support this. Motion to report, to have the planning department report back on some details of this. I do have definite reservations about one part of this motion, and that is the one to put a 2-year moratorium on adopting any additions or amendments to the sign ordinance once this program goes into place. And one of the reasons for this is that we believe it's extremely important for the city to develop regulations for on-site digital signage. These digital signage is increasing throughout the city, and without regulations that address issues of placement, of light pollution, of potential traffic safety issues, these are going to be problems for the very same people in the communities. So I would recommend that, I would hope that you would not adopt that portion of it, at least without some very further serious consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but I'm reading the letters as best as I can, but I think it's Mitch, M-I-T-H, Chenners, of the California Sign Association?
Yes, Mitch Chemmers.
Mitch Chenners, all right.
Pardon me, I didn't fill that out. My name is Mitch Chemmers. I'm a member of the California Sign Association. I'm also a local business owner and longtime resident. I wanted to just point out one item that you heard from Veronica about this proposed program. One element of it is Amnesty and Education. We feel that if enforcement's going to be a critical component of the program, even more critical will be not harming businesses, and Amnesty and Education would be critical to helping businesses shepherd them through the process of figuring out if they have a permit, if they need a permit, and give them the opportunity to come in compliance. We believe there's quite a few businesses that may not be aware of the issues, and ultimately the most important thing is to have safe and appropriate signs. And I'd like to point out that Amnesty and Education would really soften the edges of this hopefully a widely accepted and implemented program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gus Navarro, and then we'll have Ann Lillians. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. Gus Navarro, 701 North Lacme Avenue, Wilmington, California, lifetime resident in San Pedro. I'd like to express my vision here on the process of the sign permitting in the city of Los Angeles. You know, the problem that the city has right now, it's very difficult to get permits in the city, and it starts with getting permits. People come into the city, and it's no direction on what type of signs they're allowed to have. So people give up. They just say, well, why even bother getting a permit? So what we need to do with this program, as it's been said with the education and the amnesty, is to educate them and let them know what they can have for signage and develop a system that people can come in to a counter and talk to a person who is trained on issuing permits, who is familiar with building and planning and other departments that we have to deal with. People get frustrated. I've been told that. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm an electrical sign contractor. And they said, I went to the city and I have no idea what I can have. So I think what we really need to do is develop a sign counter in the city of Los Angeles, as big as we are, educate a person through the industry, through whatever resources we have available, and have a person who can talk to these people and let them know, give them visual drawings at what they can have, what they could do for signage. This way, they have an idea without having to go through a lot of problems, delays, and expenses, especially in these economic times, that they know what type of signage they can have. So I would ask for the city really to consider this program, and we really have put ourselves together, and it will work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ann Williams, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association, here to speak in support of the Sign Code Administration Program. This program is an example of the broader business community coming together and proactively and methodically building support for an effort that's really very simple in concept. We're asking the city to enforce the laws that are already on the books. We believe it is so important to start with this very simple step that we're willing to pay for it. At the same time, we want to emphasize that it's critical that we enforce existing laws before trying to enact more stringent rules that could actually make the situation worse. Without question, the most cost-effective and efficient way for a business to promote its goods and services is with on-site signage, and we must continue to protect this very basic right. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Sam Garrison.
Hi, I'm Sam Garrison with the LA Chamber, and we just want to support this motion and also thank everyone who's worked across the business community, also Mr. Hathaway, and especially city staff who've spent so much time trying to craft a win-win over the last few months on this motion, and we thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Maya Zutler and Martha Cox Nidikman. And then Charlie Gill.
Good afternoon. Maya Zutler on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We are here today to support the Sign Code Administration Program. We represent over 350 businesses across the Los Angeles region. Our business members have vetted and approved of this program. We ask that the city enforce its current sign rules rather than restrict critically important business signage during a time of record unemployment. To this end, the business community is willing to step up and help the city with resources for enforcement. But we ask that any program enacted include amnesty and education, as well as a dedicated sign desk that would allow for the streamlined permitting processing. Thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you very much.
My name is Martha Cox Nidikman. I'm with the Building Owners and Managers Association. We represent over 300 commercial office buildings in Los Angeles.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'd like to echo the comments of several of the other speakers, and again would like to echo what Mr. Navarro said about both the amnesty program and as well about permit streamlining. Many of us in the building industry are working with the city on other avenues in permit streamlining, and we think it's important that the sign desk also be instituted and continue that effort in permit streamlining. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Charlie Gill. Then we'll have Jacqueline Kerr, and then we'll have Daniel Skolnick.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Charlie Gill. I am the Executive Director of the Greater Los Angeles New Car Dealers Association. The association represents 51 new car dealer locations in the city of Los Angeles. We are pleased to support the motion before you. On-site signage is a significant part of a new car dealer's branding identity. Increasingly, the size, shape, location, lettering, and language of a new car dealer's signage are governed by extremely tight manufacturer specifications, whether it's Toyota, Honda, GM, Ford. They require each of their dealers to obey very, very tight requirements so that they have a uniform branding identity. While those specifications are compliant with existing City of Los Angeles on-site signage requirements and prohibitions, they are not for the most part compliant with the requirements and prohibitions that emerged from the Planning Commission in March of last year. Since the Planning Commission action, we have worked with fellow members of the Sign Coalition, staff of the Planning Department, and Building and Safety, as well as with council offices on numerous issues relating to on-site signage. What you have before you is, in our judgment, the reasoned and thoughtful result of those meetings. We respectfully urge committee approval of Councilman Cardenas's motion. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Jacqueline Kerr, Greater Griffith Park Neighborhood Council, Planning Zoning Committee, and Barnesville Art Park Foundation. Of course, everybody is in support of this. Anything that's going to help regulate signage and make money for the city is a very good thing. The important word here, again, is streamline. The simpler this is going to be, the easier it's going to be to affect. We don't know at this point if this is temporary, a temporary program, or if it's intended to be on an ongoing basis. I would ask at this point that as the program progresses, that there be future public input that beyond today. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And our last speaker.
Good afternoon, Council members. Daniel Swolnick from Councilman Members Cardenas's office. We all want to take a hammer to Blight in this city, but what we have before us today is a velvet hammer, something that will increase our code enforcement in the city, fund it, but would also spend significant time and energy in education for our business and industrial landowners and operators. So with that, I would ask for your adoption of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a directive here, and we would So again, the request is to generate these reports, and I would move that we could adopt and report back in 6 months. Yes. And that'll be a second. And that'll be action of this committee. Okay. Item number 2, Roberto?
Yes, council members, item 2 is a city attorney prepared ordinance. It's relative to establishment of community plan implementation overlay districts, Cpio.
Okay, can I have staff report on this?
Good afternoon, council members. Michelle Sorkin, planning staff. Before you today is the final ordinance for the community plan implementation overlay district, a new type of supplemental use district. This is an enabling ordinance. It was initiated about 2 years ago as part of an effort to create new zoning tools for community plans. The Cpio ordinance was previously heard here at Plum October 14th last year, and it's now back as it has been reviewed for form and legality. A little bit of background on the Cpio. The Cpio was really conceived out of our new community plan process. At that time, staff evaluated various supplemental use districts in the municipal code. We looked at pedestrian oriented districts, specific plans, community design overlays, and it became apparent that a new tool was necessary as we develop our new community plans. We were looking to develop a new zoning overlay district similar to specific plans that would reduce the need for Q conditions, Q zoning, and enable projects that comply with standards in an overlay district to receive ministerial review by planning department staff as an incentive, so streamlined review. The Cpio district could target wider geographic areas than are traditionally addressed by specific plans and community design overlays because of this potential for a streamlined review. It reduces the need for case processing by planning staff. Parcels in a Cpio district can be grouped contiguously or by a common theme. So Cpio districts could be used for mixed-use corridors, transit-oriented districts, or to address design and multifamily zoning. The Cpio, as it's written, is really a hybrid of several existing zoning tools. You can think of it as a specific plan light, or a combination of specific plan, CDO, and pedestrian-oriented design districts. Cpio is a long-term solution and a possible replacement for the use of Q zoning to implement our community plan policies. In order to adopt a Cpio district, strict findings have to be made that the district is implementing the community plan in which it's located. So each community plan ultimately will have Cpio districts that are contiguous with community plan boundaries, with sub-areas within each district that address specific themes or issues that evolve out of the community plan. We've done public outreach. Back in March of 2009, we had a public workshop, and at that point, that was well attended, and there was little fanfare.
Where was it located, or where did they have these meetings? What were the locations of these meetings?
It was right here in City Hall on the 10th floor.
Okay.
And we've worked with the city attorney to craft the ordinance. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure we understand how this tool is being perceived and how it gets triggered. So we know we're going through a range of community plans. There's about how many that need to be completed still? Do you know the number?
6, is that right?
How many more community plans do we need to finish in the city of LA?
Currently, 31 of our plans are more than 10 years old.
Okay, so we have 31 community plans that are more than 10 years old, and what this tool allows is an approach to deal with a range of issues, and issues that are raised and addressed by the stakeholders in each neighborhood and each community plan, correct?
That's correct.
So any one stakeholder who is part of the discussion in that community plan, in that specific neighborhood, could choose to use this tool to address certain concerns.
That's correct. So if there's a need, an established need for a Cpio district in an area, through the community plan process, which would involve public hearings for any change to zoning, these districts could be established to address neighborhood needs.
So a stakeholder in that discussion can be the whole range. It could be the neighborhood council, it could be a homeowner association, it could be a preservation group, or it could just be a member of the community who's concerned.
Well, actually, there's one correction to that, and I forgot to introduce my colleague Shauna Bonston, who has also been instrumental on the ordinance. The CPIO district can only be, unlike other supplemental use districts, CPIO can be established by the Director of Planning. It can be initiated by City Council or City Planning Commission. Other supplemental use districts allow individual property owners to initiate an application. In this case, it was decided that because of the process that's involved in establishing a district, because the districts grow out of the needs established through community plan policies, they're larger than one individual parcel or one property owner.
So the efficiencies that this tool brings, because you did mention the specific plan, and at one time in the history of the planning department, we had many specific plans because we were not completing our community plans. So at this stage, the CPIO gives us, what type of advantage do we gain with a CPIO when we allude to a specific plan? Do you happen to see the difference? Can you articulate the advantage of a CPIO versus a specific plan?
The major advantage or improvement here over specific plans is really in terms of incentivizing those projects that comply with the requirements of the CPIO district by creating an easy process through the administrative clearance process. It essentially allows projects that comply with the requirements of the CPIO outright to receive an over-the-counter approval, whereas with specific plans, we have to make findings of compliance, and those determinations are appealable. Now, ministerial approvals in which the projects meet all of the relevant criteria of the CPIO can receive quick approvals over the counter.
So for the past 20, 30 years, thousands of hours and many, many meetings have been in place to establish specific plans. Does this, because I'm playing devil's advocate now, does the CPIO displace a specific plan? Does it override a specific plan?
No, not at all. CPIOs are intended to be applied to new areas that are not currently covered by specific plans. So existing specific plans would stay in place, but as we develop our new plans and think of ways to implement those plans and think of ordinances to effectuate those policies, the CPIO gives us more flexibility as planning staff to cover broader areas without really the concern for tremendous amounts of staff time for writing determination letters for projects that comply.
I have more questions, but I want to make sure my colleagues have an opportunity to raise questions, because I do have a few more, and I know you guys are tuned into this, and I've been doing nothing but meetings, right? For how many hours now? 6 hours? 6 hours today. Yeah, was that the council meeting? The reason why I'm raising this question is because it speaks to a range of opportunities, and it is a new tool which causes a lot of concern. Because I know how much has been invested throughout the city, how much time and resources for the specific plans. I know many areas did not get the opportunity to benefit from them, and many of them have. So in that regard, when we talk about reinforcing a historic character or an architectural theme, or whether it's a level of density that is likened to a single bedroom community, these instruments can help preserve those areas?
Yeah, that's correct. So this tool, it has the same benefits of a specific plan. The only difference is that the CPIO is administered, so all of the regulations could be similar to what a specific plan could accomplish. So the end is the same. The only difference is in the processing, because these districts would be processed by planning staff. So theoretically, when the community agrees to what's needed for an area, all of that is synthesized into a CPIO district, and then planning staff would then implement that CPIO district the same way they would a specific plan.
And it holds true if we're looking at transit stations where you have the opportunity to create new nodes of development where you have a greater envelope to work with. As long as the underlying zone allows it, you can craft quality, well thought out envelopes of space that speaks to how we enhance that mode to be opportunistic with the transit system. Is that accurate as well?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So in the process of developing these districts, say in a transit district, as you mentioned, it's an opportunity to take another look at the zoning, the baseline zoning, to determine if the zoning is conducive to affordable housing and the types of programs that we seek at transit stations. And using the zoning in tandem with the CPIO district, what you're creating is good design that actually accomplishes some of the larger community plan policies like transit-oriented development and potentially affordable housing.
So the big assumption here is that the stakeholders played a role in how that CPIO has been defined, and now we've created destinations for either investment and or for change that accommodates the goals of that specific area based on the priorities of those stakeholders.
Right, and so that's why the ordinance before you today is an enabling ordinance, which basically just establishes the procedures, the intent, and the framework for these districts. And individual districts will go through the public hearing process and the public community outreach process on a community basis. It's really just a general tool for us planners to use as we're talking to community members to accomplish some of the things that we're hearing are needed.
Let's go through public comment, and if we have more questions, we'll raise them. And we do have a couple of cards. We have Ms. Laura Lake, and I believe we have Gary Brosman. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. I've reviewed the file, and I have several serious concerns about this. I view this as CPIO as a wannabe specific plan, and I don't think it's needed. I think we do need to use staff time to update the community plans, update the specific plans if that's necessary. My concern is that this is essentially upzoning without some of the protections that go with upzoning, okay? Particularly community benefits. And so my concerns are that this is spot zoning, gifts to developers who plead self-imposed hardship. You can't do that to get a specific plan exception. You can for this. The findings are really, really different, and it gives it from 10 to 20% authority for the ZA and the planning director to meet privately, over the counter, and make several major changes, such as parking, height, floor area, you name it. So it's moving it ahead, but without the protections, and most importantly, due process, because there is no notice to neighbors in the area. So even though there's an appeal, if the applicant doesn't get the approval, you wouldn't even know about it because there's no notice. So I get really concerned about a procedure that's sort of like a specific plan, sort of like a zone change, call it what you want. It's another layer of bureaucracy that has profound impacts for transparent government.
Right, and Ms. Lakin, let me share with you what I what I heard. My understanding is that the underlying zone remains. It doesn't get changed. So the underlying zone essentially defines the height. It defines that which the zone is crafting in those particular sites. So that does not change. So on the upzoning side, that's why I'm a little unclear to me out why you would see it that way if they're making it clear that the zone doesn't change. So that's one point. The other point is the Cpio is used, if I'm hearing them correctly, to put together the stakeholders that will define the Cpio. So that which is needed to be addressed, the benefits, the community benefit, or the flexibility of a parcel in terms of its capacity, will have been predetermined by the stakeholders who helped create the Cpio. So in that definition and in that process, people are already informed as to what's going to be allowed.
Let's go back to the underlying zoning, because I think that's really the starting point. It stays in place, but you can quietly come in and ask for 20% more. And if you ask for several mores, whether it's floor area or height or setbacks, then it's an exception. But the findings for that exception aren't the same standards as a specific plan exception.
Okay.
And you get an inconsistency between the specific plans, the community plan, and this Cpio. It's a mess. You can't change one without adjusting for the others. And there's no environmental analysis to know what a 20% increase in the build-out for the city, I realize it's not every area, but worst case scenario, 20% extra build-out and no environmental analysis, no data to conclude that the indirect impacts of these approvals won't harm the environment.
I appreciate what you're saying. Maybe give the staff an opportunity to respond, because committee work is about trying to address these questions. And you're one of two speakers, that's what we're going through this dialogue. But if I can have the staff respond to, I think one of the most profound points I heard was that it can be quietly increased by a percentage. Can you address that? Would you mind, Ms. Lake? Allow them the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle Sorkin, planning staff. To answer the question about adjustments from Cpio, the Cpio does not grant deviations from the underlying zone. So as with any supplemental use district, when a project is seeking a variance from the zone, it can't be granted through the procedures of the supplemental use district.
It cannot?
No. However, the requirements of the Cpio itself, the Cpio district, those regulations, there is a process for adjustments of up to 20% from the deviations. Those projects do not qualify for ministerial review, however. That's similar to a specific plan adjustment in that it's handled by planning staff.
But I'm sorry, but pragmatically speaking, that means if you have those recommended changes, there has to be a community review, there has to be a public hearing. Is it done quietly or not? I mean, that's the assertion that's being made.
Yeah, the difference is there is no public hearing for the adjustment. There is a public hearing for the exception to the Cpio. So that is a difference from the specific plan. However,
are the exceptions defined by the stakeholders when
yes.
the Cpio is created?
Exactly. So when the Cpio ordinance gives the stakeholders and planning staff the flexibility to determine up front which regulations qualify for adjustment or exception and which do not. So in areas where, say, landscaping is a very important feature on a project, and it's non-negotiable to the community, and therefore, the community decides that no project should be granted an adjustment from landscaping requirements, that can be written into an individual Cpio ordinance. So all of that is predetermined by the stakeholders in consultation with the planner.
Gotcha. Okay. Colleagues, any questions? No?
Can I just, Shauna Bunsen,
Please.
Planning Department, I just have a couple other points of clarification based on the comments. So currently in the specific plan process, adjustments actually don't have a public hearing as well unless they were appealed.
Can you say that one more time?
Adjustment from a specific plan is also a director's case. So there's not a public hearing on that unless that decision is appealed, whereas an exception does have a public hearing.
For the CPIO?
Specific plan, just because we're comparing the two, so it kind
Okay.
of makes them more similar in that sense. And then just to restate, again, the CPIO would not impact height or FAR, and it's not privately initiated. So this would be city-initiated in conjunction usually with a community plan and other outreach process. And finally, in terms of the environmental analysis, this being an implementing, what's the phrase? Enabling. An enabling ordinance that is so broad that the individual communities, when they came forward with CPIO and community plans, would have environmental analysis at that point.
Okay.
And just to piggyback a little bit on Shauna's last point, our community plans in progress now, each of them have an environmental impact report associated with the plan update. And so any new zoning tools would be studied in the EIR for that respective community plan.
Okay. Well, let's hear from the next speaker. Can we come back to you? Let's hear the one more speaker, and then we'll come back to you. And because you're the only two speakers, so we're being a little more flexible, and I'm very sensitive to my colleagues. Yes.
Sure. Councilman Kerry Braisman, LA Neighbors United, and a member of the board of directors of Friends of the Los Angeles River. I'll just jump right in, and the good that we take out of this is the focus on district-wide planning. That's a good thing to the extent we're doing it in the city and doing more of it, and the fact that we're trying to streamline application processes and procedures for compliant projects. That's a good thing. That said, we also believe that this tool is not necessary to do what the city is trying to do. Through plan amendments and the process that's already in place relative to community plans, we can accomplish the exact same goals relative to creating these special districts. And following on a comment from Mr. Bell, I would suggest that relative to community plan update prioritization, perhaps we focus as a city on the plans that include our transit-oriented districts and really make a concerted effort in the next couple of years to do better planning in and around TODs in those community plan areas that are most affected. Again, we've got a process for doing this already. I'll skip around a little bit. This notion of administrative clearance, again, in concept, it's fine, but the problematic area is we're giving with this ordinance to the city the ability to clear projects in districts where the implementing regulations have not yet been written. So we're saying here's a blank check to approve projects in districts where we don't yet have implementing regulations. So we think that's a problem. Following on the discussion that just occurred relative to exceptions, the biggest change that this particular tool represents relative to the existing community plan process is the introduction of exceptions into community plan areas. Today we don't allow exceptions in community plan areas. It's either a variance, it's an adjustment, or a plan amendment. We don't allow exceptions. We're introducing exceptions. That's a big deal, and we need to be concerned about what the consequences of that.
I think just for the sake of clarity, the exceptions are not going to come out of, I don't sound sarcastic, but they're not just going to appear. The exceptions will be part of the CPIO as defined by the stakeholders when the CPIO is created. So if there are exceptions, it's only because the stakeholders involved in the creation of CPIO have engaged the process and came up with those exceptions. So that's
that's the way you read it. I mean, you're asking us to accept on faith that will in fact occur. I mean, today, relative to specific plans, we don't see in the code language that defines when and where and how an exception can be determined relative to a specific plan. Some specific plans are more specific than others relative to exceptions.
It's not how I read it, it's the way it's been described to us.
Sure.
Okay.
We're concerned, following up a point that Michelle made relative to
can you just conclude?
Sure. Relative to queue conditions, we're concerned that CPIOs would override existing queue conditions, CDOs, PODs, NSOs, and ICOs. And again, just to hit that one point about exceptions, if you were to ask me what's the one thing that would make the community feel better about this, so that would be to pull the idea of exceptions out of this ordinance as part of consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lake, can we make it quick?
Very quick, 2 points. One is that adjustments now and slight modifications only are 10% changes, not 20, under the zoning code. The other thing is that there is public notice with the adjustments and slight modifications. The ZA has the right to waive a hearing if it's not perceived to be controversial. So I stand by what I said. This is kissing, due process, goodbye. And that's a scary thing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. You guys want to add anything to add before we move this item?
Just a few points of clarification on some of the questions that were raised. The CPIO ordinance would not override existing queue conditions or other types of overlays and zoning and specific plans.
It will not.
It will not, just to clarify that. It's intended in lieu of establishing new queue conditions in areas where we're working on community plans, because queues have historically been used because there hasn't been a kind of tool that can do so much without creating a specific plan.
So that's where the efficiencies.
That's where the efficiency comes in, right?
And does that mean shorter time periods?
Well, the efficiency is in the review of projects that comply.
Okay.
Okay. And as far as the point about adjustments, I think Mrs. Lake was referring to zoning administrator adjustments. The CPIO district is really modeled on specific plan procedures. It's unlike zoning administrator procedures. As far as the need for an exception procedure, we do have to provide applicants with a form of relief. There will always be instances where, an applicant cannot meet the requirements of a district, and so legally there has to be a means of relief for projects that don't comply, and there are findings for those exceptions and adjustments.
Okay. Well, thank you for this hard work. We're always trying to figure out ways to address the needs of the city, and to me this sounds like an approach that obviously will be discussed before the full council. This is a city attorney report and draft ordinance relative to amending the municipal code and adding a new section to enable the establishment of community plan implementation overlay districts. So we're at that stage of the process. So we're ready to send this to the council. This will be an ordinance and enabling language, and we can engage the discussion again. Is there an action that we would like to take? I'd like to move it forward. Do I have a second? I have a second. And that's unanimous. And again, Ms. Lake and Sir, let's continue working together. Let's figure out how we make this more efficient. I strongly believe in predictability. If we are more predictable, we have less tension, less lawsuits, and a healthier city. So I appreciate that very much. So that being said, Roberto?
So you're approving the city attorney prepare ordinance, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And this is where we go to council, correct?
Yes.
And the ordinance will be in place by
Yes,
then?
it's already done.
Okay, good. I guess it's item number 4, that's next?
Yes, item 4, council members, is an appeal by the West Hollywood West Residents Association. It's a sequel appeal relative to the approval of an LMD for a 125-unit apartment building with 11 very low-income affordable units in CD5.
Did we have public hearing on this already?
No.
No? Okay. Well, let's hear the report, then we'll go from there. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This case was continued from the last
It was continued.
Plum
Okay,
meeting,
I remember it was here before.
This is Blake Lamb, Planning Department staff. You have before you 2 appeals to the City Council of the City Planning Commission and the Central Los Angeles Area Planning Commission's adoption of the mitigated negative declaration for City Planning Case Number DIR-2007-5179-SPR-DB-1A-2A, located at 375 to 393 North La Cienega and 407 to 417 Northwest Mount Drive. In May of 2010, the Director of Planning approved a density bonus compliance review and site plan review for the project, which consists of 125-unit multifamily residential project. 2 appeals of the Director's determination were filed. On July 8th, 2010, the Planning Commission denied both appeals of the project's density bonus compliance review and upheld the Director's adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. On September 14th, 2010, the Area Planning Commission denied both appeals of the site plan review and again upheld the Director's adoption of the mitigated negative declaration and approval of the site plan review. There's no further appeal of the Director's approval of the density bonus or site plan review. Under California state law, however, there may be appeals of both commissions' adoptions of the mitigated negative declaration. What is before you today are 2 appeals. 1 appeal of the City Planning Commission's adoption of the MND to City Council and 1 appeal of the Area Planning Commission's adoption of the MND to City Council. The Planning Department has submitted today additional findings for Council to review and adopt in support of the decisions by the City Planning Commission and Central Area Planning Commission to uphold the Planning Director's adoption of the mitigated negative declaration for this project. The Planning Department recommends that these 2 appeals be denied and that the new findings before you today be adopted. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on with the public hearing, and let's hear from the appellants first. And let's hear from the persons who are appealing and give us the reason for your appeal. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Thank you. Lauren Meister, West Hollywood resident. On behalf of the appellants, myself, West Hollywood West Residents Association, we urge you to grant the appeal. 1, there is no precedent in the immediate area of a project with this height and FAR directly adjacent to a low-density residential neighborhood with no alley or street to act as a buffer. Staff cannot compare the project to the Beverly Center or Sofitel, which have Beverly Boulevard, Beverly Place, and a cul-de-sac to act as a buffer between them and the residential area. Unlike the east side of La Cienega, there's no alley between the project and the residential area behind it. With no buffer, a massive project over 56 feet tall will literally overpower the adjacent single-family homes. 2, the proposed project borders another city with different development standards and environmental standards and that alone is justification for an EIR. 3, the residential area is designated a neighborhood conservation overlay district and the potential aesthetic impacts to this visual environment need to be analyzed. 4, there is substantial evidence that suggests that availability of public services is limited and project approval may create a further strain on infrastructure in the form of traffic, power outages, water rationing, and rate hikes which must be borne by current residents. 5, staff states the project is consistent with the general plan. However, the city is obligated by the general plan's framework element and its city charter to prepare annual growth and infrastructure reports and has failed to prepare such a report since the year 2000. Therefore, staff cannot make a finding of consistency. 6, providing housing is not sufficient reason to exempt a project from an EIR. The owner of the Beverly Connection agreed to withdraw plans for residential as part of a settlement with Burton Way Foundation, the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association, that challenged the expansion in court, citing concerns about density in one of the city's most congested areas and no EIR. We share those concerns. 7, SB 1818 does not establish an exemption from CEQA requirements. If there is substantial evidence that the project may result in a significant effect on the environment, an EIR must be prepared. We'd also feel that protections could have been conditioned, but without the benefit of further study, the city is not doing its due diligence. I ask you to consider letters of concern from Carrie Braisman of the Mid-City West Community Council and Lucille Saunders of the La Brea Willoughby Coalition. To summarize, there are multiple grounds for rejecting the project, including an inadequate M&D and strained infrastructure which could jeopardize public health and safety. We request that you please send the project back to the Planning Department with the requirement that an EIR be prepared to accurately analyze potentially significant project impacts and ways to mitigate those impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, you are representing Beverly Perino and
Patty Machetta, Brittany Perino,
Okay.
myself, and West Hollywood West Residents Association.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is, because that does address all the appellants, Anne Isabel Brousseau. And then we'll have, I believe it's Marilla Baker Taylor. Is that accurate? Marcella, I'm sorry. Please.
Hi, I'm Anne Isabel Brousseau. I'm a resident of West Hollywood. We urge the City Council to grant the appeal and deny the adoption of the MND. First, the traffic study was flawed. It credits trips for the restaurant use that was non-existent at the time of the study. The Acapulco closed in 2007. The study was conducted in 2008. This inaccurate analysis is misleading and favors the project by showing a lower number of net trips. Also, the study does not include an analysis of Rosewood Avenue and how the project would impact this local neighborhood street. Second, regarding shade and shadow, the applicant states assumptions with no analysis or comparison between what exists now, what could be built under the current zoning, and the proposed project. A 56-feet building at that location would cast a shadow in December of approximately 165 feet at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. and 90 feet at noon. Given that the project is only 50 feet away from residences to the north and 17 feet away from residences to the west, there is substantial evidence of a potential significant environmental impact. Third, regarding noise, we know that sound carries. How will everyday sounds such as voices or music from walkways, balconies, or other open space overlooking backyards be deflected or muffled so as not to disturb the neighbors only a few feet away? Regarding construction noise, the applicant claims that using plywood and flexible curtains will reduce 106 decibels to less than significant levels of 75 decibels. They might get a 10 or 20 decibel reduction, but that only lowers the noise to 80 or 90 decibels, still above the level of significance. They say they will impose all measures that are technically feasible, but that does not mean that they reduce the noise level to a level of insignificance. Only with an EIR will these issues be adequately analyzed, discussed, and mitigated. Please grant the appeal.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker, Marcella Baker Taylor. Then we'll have Jeff Phelps, and then Harold Perino. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Marcella Taylor, resident of West Hollywood. Substantial evidence has provided that LA's infrastructure is not adequate to handle this development. Of particular concern is water. In a recent article, the 10 biggest American cities that are running out of water, 24/7 Wall Street looked at an October 2010 report on water risk conducted by Ceres, an environmental research and sustainability group. They also considered a comprehensive report from the National Resources Defense Council, released last July, which mapped areas at high risk of water shortage conflict. According to this article, the Colorado River may only be a temporary solution, as LA continues to increase its demand at an unsustainable rate. The article states, In its utility risk rating, Ceres gave the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power the highest likelihood of risk among the cities that it assessed. In addition, the Hoover Dam, which is the main source of electricity for LA and much of the greater Southwest, is also producing at a lower rate than it has historically. Some scientists suspect this drop-off will continue to a point where its electricity production is too small to sustain the dam economically. For this project, the demand for water is estimated at over 10 times the current demand. Now, why is it that customers are being asked to cut water usage by 10 to 15% and being charged a penalty if we go over, and yet the development is moving along as if there's unlimited sources for water? Every drop of water that goes toward this project is a drop being literally taken away from the current customers. Every raise in current customers' rates to forest conservation is effectively forcing current customers to subsidize new developments. Please grant this appeal. Only with an ERI will these issues be adequately analyzed, discussed, and mitigated. EIR.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Our next speaker, Jeff Phelps. I know he was stunned with that statement, weren't you?
Yeah. Hi guys, thank you. My name's Jeff Phelps. I live at 362 Westbourne. I'm one of the poor guys who will be 17 feet from this, directly adjacent. The bottom line here is we urge you, the City Council, to grant the appeal and overturn approval of this project. One of the things we're concerned about is how the use of large construction equipment is going to impact all the neighbors there, especially us who have a house right on the line that clearly was built long enough ago that this kind of banging is going to cause cracks and damages. We don't know what conditions for bond or insurance to mitigate construction problems have been placed on the project to protect us, the neighbors. Regarding geology, soils, and hydrology, all exciting terms, I know. We know that this site overlays a major underground water system that had sufficient reliable flow to supply the Beverly Hills Water Department water wells on La Cienega for nearly a century. This system, including source watershed, source flows, routes, and dimensions of major aquifers and rivers, flow rates, directional flows, and pressures, is not adequately described, and the impacts of its interference have not been properly analyzed. Local experience with the high groundwater table is extensive, and there have been numerous reports of special problems in the area, including subsidence, collapse, flooding, flotation, buoyancy, mold, and the discovery and inadvertent dispersal of hazardous or toxic substances, including but not limited to oil, tar, explosive fumes, gasoline, and oil production residue. We know that groundwater table levels permanently rose immediately to the north following the construction of the Sofitel Hotel. We know the hotel must pump out water 24 hours a day. The Center for Early Education had planned to construct 2 levels of underground parking and then could not because they encountered unexpected water table problems. Only with an EIR will these issues be adequately analyzed, discussed, and mitigated. Thanks for giving me the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Harold Perno? Apologize.
That's okay. Honorable council members, I'm Harold Perino. I am a neighbor to Jeffrey Phelps. I'm at 402 Westbourne Drive, also a resident of West Hollywood. I'm going to say some things that you guys have already heard, but I'm just going to restate them once again. And really, this is just, we're asking you to grant this appeal just to have the EIR so that they could come in and look so that we can discuss these things and really find adequate solutions for them. So the staff states that the proposed project would not introduce an incompatible element to the visual character of the project vicinity, considering the existing varying building heights and the urban character of the area. But on the contrary, the proposed project is out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood of West Hollywood West, which is a neighborhood conservation overlay district. The zoning of the project site is a C2-1VL-O, which allows for buildings 45 feet tall, which with a very limited floor to area ratio of 1.5 to 1. But with the bonuses and the incentives, the proposed project will be over 56 feet tall, which is something you've already heard, and an FAR of nearly 3 to 1. And so the increase in the floor area ratio is not consistent with the zoning and the surrounding area on La Cienega. In fact, it's double what would be allowed if there were no bonuses. It'd be setting a very dangerous precedent, that would be heading down a very slippery slope. In terms of land use and planning, it's not compatible in terms of height and floor area with the ratio with either the existing commercial establishments on La Cienega or adjacent neighborhoods. This you've also heard, unlike on the east side of La Cienega and unlike the Sofitel and Beverly Center, there is no alleyway between the street and the commercial properties and the residential to act as a buffer. So a 56-foot tall building with the balconies and space looming over backyards, which would be my backyard, and that's my time, that would literally overwhelm our families. And so thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming to City Hall. We have Laura Lee Shark, and then we'll have Dale Goldsmith, and we'll conclude with Christopher Cruz.
Hello. I am Lorelei Shark, and I am a neighbor, and it's very important to me what goes on here because I happen to live across the street on the other side of...
Can you speak into the microphone? We can hear you better. There you go.
I don't like microphones. Hi.
There you go.
This project is 350 feet up La Cienega from where I live. I'm in back of a Blockbuster parking lot and a banner packing. I have a few things. They keep saying that they don't have an alley or a street separating them. They have a wall. When I walk out of my garage, I am facing Banner Crate and Packing that had 2 armed robberies over the summer. It's real important to me what gets moved into this area. Blockbuster is in Chapter 11. I can see them selling their property. It's a huge piece of property. They're going to be building something back there. So I said to myself, what would I want in back of my building? Because let's face it, none of us want anything back there. It's all intrusive on our homes. I live in an area where I can look at the Beverly Center Sofitel, I can look at the Beverly Connection. I see restaurants and stores lining up La Cienega. It is overwhelming, the amount of traffic and the people who are there. And I decided that I would welcome apartments where people go home, close their doors, and it's quiet. And they talk about water. There's a beauty shop there that washes water all day long. There are, washes hair. There's restaurants that wash dishes all day long. There's a car wash that washes cars all day long. So you can sit here thinking, well, maybe we can have something better, something that won't be 56 feet tall. Oops, is that it?
Can you conclude?
Huh?
Can you finish?
Yes. Their project steps up, so it's 56 feet on La Cienega, which I appreciated that they made the effort to do it lower in the back where the residents are. You have a letter from me, and it basically says if their project were in back of me, I would accept it because I think it's a terrific project.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Ms. Goldsmith?
Good afternoon, Chair Reyes, honorable committee members. My name is Dale Goldsmith. I'm a partner with the law firm of Armbruster, Goldsmith & Delvac, representing the applicant NMS Lux 375. For many months, our client has worked with the planning department staff and the community to make the project even more compatible with the surrounding community. Among the many changes, the applicant has created a greater setback, including an upper-level step back and landscaping to buffer the adjacent single-family uses. In contrast, a commercial by-right project could be built all the way to the lot line, 45 feet tall. In addition, the balconies were changed from clear to opaque to preserve privacy, and the parking was increased by 30%. As a result, the project has earned the support of the Los Angeles local homeowners organization, Beverly Wilshire Homes. The project and its MND have been thoroughly scrutinized by each and every planning body in the city of Los Angeles, including the Urban Design Studio, the planning department staff, the planning director, the APC, and a CPC. We hit for the cycle on this one. And each of those bodies determined that the mitigated negative declaration was appropriate. The appellants assert that all these bodies got it wrong. They did not get it wrong. The MND fully complies with CEQA. Each of the arguments you heard today are the same arguments we've been hearing. This is the fourth time around. All of those arguments have been thoroughly refuted by expert studies and other substantial evidence in the record which conclusively show that with mitigation, the project will not result in any significant environmental impacts. Therefore, we respectfully request that you reject the appeals and uphold the well-reasoned determinations by your planning director, by the APC, and by the CPC to adopt the mitigated negative declaration to allow this project's housing and affordable housing to come online and also to allow jobs to be created. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Goldsmith? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Our last speaker, Christopher Coons. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, council members, members of the committee, almost good evening. Councilman Paul Koretz is proud to support this project. I thought I'd take just a moment to point out why. This is a density bonus project in front of you in a district where the councilman's no big fan of that law and the way that works. But in this case, we had a developer that worked for 2 years to gain community support for this project, that was asked to make change after change after change and made them all, that added parking to this project. It's a residential project that will have setbacks in landscaping that a commercial project would not have. And it's going to be a beautiful building that's going to help us with this situation on La Cienega. There's a lot adjacent to this project referred to as the P lot, which is a problem location. There's congregation of people at night, people that come out of the adult bar next door and congregate, and that situation is going to be under control after this project's built. This project is also going to put eyes on the street on La Cienega where there aren't residents today, and it's going to make for a safer street, and it's going to make for a 24-hour street. We're proud of this project. And as difficult as it was to gain my boss's support, the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association, which represents the LA residents adjacent to this development, and we love them and they do a great job of advocating for their community, but for them to support a project is a rare event, and it's a testament to the fact that this developer worked so hard to get a project that everyone could be happy with. In regards to the appeal before you, you can't build anything without an impact. What's in front of you is whether there's a significant impact, and we've relied upon DOT and planning to look at those impacts, and we know that the M&D is valid and there are not significant impacts. This project is consistent with the zoning. It will fit on the street, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention what else could happen on this site. They're building 125 apartment units. It's going to net about 466 daily traffic trips. If they were to develop as right with no environmental and nothing but a building permit, 50,000 square feet of office, that'd be 1,427 trips a day. And if they were to develop this site by right with no environmental and no entitlement as a grocery store, it would be 5,250 vehicle trips per day. So I think while some of us would like to have this preserved in a bubble and never change, when we look at our options for this site, we're very happy with this development, and we think that we got the best of possible choices, and we would ask you to support the project and deny the appeals.
Okay, any questions of a representative? Seeing none, do we have an action on this committee? Support the project means deny the appeal. Okay, all right. Sounds like it's a unanimous. The findings?
I believe the planning department submitted revised findings, Council. So you could include those as well.
We'll include the findings with the action of this committee. Okay, and seeing no other questions, anybody have a public comment? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.